I'm Holly.
I'm Leslie.
And we would be dead. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Fiends. We are back with part 2 of the Disappearance of Mark Himebaugh. And as per usual with part 2s, we're going to get down to business as quickly as we can. And if you have not listened to part 1, you're going to want to go back and do that right now, because I'm not going to review the copious details I put into last week's episode. There's just too many to do that. So you're going to get kind of confused when I start talking about streets and marshes and things if you haven't listened. Or if you want to go back and listen again, because it's been one additional week, go ahead. I had the flu for a really long time.
Yeah.
Like way too long.
It's a big one that's going around.
Yeah, be careful, guys. The flu that's going around is scary. And I was running fever sick for 10 days. It was a nightmare. I'm still not totally myself yet, but that's all right. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. That being said, if you want to see Leslie and I looking revitalized and fresh after I've been crawling around with the flu and Leslie's been working to just keep us afloat.
Oh, yes. So much.
So much. There's only one ingredient that will do that. And it is just a little shot of
validation. A hill worth dying on and on and on and on, on and on and on.
Whoa.
On and on.
Perfect. I needed that perky little pickup this week. And best of all, Leslie, our fiends can give us that ingredient totally free of charge.
Shut the door. How?
But how, you must be asking yourself? Well, I will tell you. Simply head on over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and or a friendly review. It really is the only way to move this podcast forward. Ratings and reviews equal attention. Attention equals support. And support equals more and better content for all of you.
Wow.
Yes. But if you just can't wait for more We Would Be Dead in your life, don't worry. You don't have to. You can support us over on Patreon.
Na, na, na,
And
na,
on
na,
and
na,
on.
na, na.
Keep going forever. There, for just a few dollars a month, you will gain access to our entire catalog of 30-minute horror movies, our special minisodes, our weekly after show Host Mortem, which is available in both video and audio formats. Maybe you want to see our faces. Maybe you don't. Both are okay. I mean, we'll be a little sad if you don't want to see our faces, but fine, whatever.
It's also okay.
It is okay.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's totally fine.
I'm not upset at all.
No, but we will have a host mortem after this episode. We didn't do it last week.
Yes.
We will have one after this one.
Yes, we will. For sure. You'll also get a special gift in the mail from us, the opportunity to participate in some giveaways. You'll get merch deals, an on-air toast dedicated just to you, and more.
Woo, woo.
I know, and for no reason at all, St. Patrick's Day is our favorite holiday, and it's coming up. So I'm hoping that maybe we'll do a little merch something. We have our toast shirts.
Yeah.
We don't need new merch. We just want to sell it to you again.
Let me write that down.
Toast shirts.
Toast.
Make a note.
Shirt.
In case you haven't seen them, we have really cool green shirts with yellow text on them that say toast. Because that's our thing.
Yeah.
And they're really awesome. And if you want one, you should let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the past, we've done these really fun little pass the drink videos where anyone who has them does a little toast and we put them together.
Yeah.
That was really fun.
That was cute.
Maybe we'll do it again. You never know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we also have more exclusive content in the works for our beloved patrons and just more stuff that we're going to do over on Patreon in the future. I think we've been talking about that. But if you have anything you'd like to see or have any ideas for stuff you want over on Patreon, please let us know. In all honesty, we are here thanks to our patrons, so come on over and be part of the We Would Be Dead family. And if all of that is a little too much for you, you can simply follow us on social media. We are at Would Be Dead Pod anywhere and everywhere you get your content. You can like our posts, share our posts, Like and share our posts.
That is a great idea.
That's preferable. You can leave us a comment. We love to talk to you, as long as you're friendly. You can post about your favorite episode. Let us know when you're listening. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell the old lady on the corner whose hoarding tendencies are so wild she's had to build several sheds to accommodate them. What's her name? We had one last week. Her name was Gloria, but I think that she needs a friend.
Yeah, for sure. Edith, for sure.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I imagine they smoke so heavily.
Oh,
like
Edith.
I have so many stuff. I went to the thrift today.
Oh, Gloria, you won't believe what I just got at the thrift store.
I love all of these gadgets. I got an entire bag full of buttons.
Oh, I love a gadget bag.
They're pretty fun. Yep. Then Gloria and Edith can become fiends and we can all hang out together.
I love it.
They'll show us all their stuff.
Yes.
Perfect.
It was fill a bag for $5.
Oh, no.
I filled 5.
I got a pound of clothes. It was pounds of clothes.
I dropped off a bag. I came back with 4.
Never the point. But you know what? Good for you, Edith.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I have in the way of news before we begin. My news is, just to recap, my news was I hope we bring back our toast shirts.
Yeah. That was it? That was the news?
Everything else was not really important news.
Gotcha. Well, I feel like I want to say happy 200th. I know this is our 201.
200 part B.
Yeah, I think it's like 200. Yeah, part B. Birthday and, well, anniversary. I don't know.
200 episodes.
200 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And happy 5 years.
That's right. This week was our 5-year anniversary. I've been so disgustingly sick that like nothing registered for me.
No, things happen. When you get older, you just don't feel like
celebrating. No. But we really do need to celebrate.
Yeah.
5 years is pretty momentous, and so is 200 episodes. Yeah. And I'm hoping, because again, our unofficial holiday is St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
For no reason at all. I'm hoping maybe we can rally by then and do some celebrating.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys can tune in from wherever you are in the country.
Cool.
Yeah, can virtually hang out. Anyway, you added something.
I did. Wow.
Oh my God, good job.
I think I promised I would.
I think you did.
Last week.
Do you have anything else to add before we begin?
No, I'm feeling pretty good.
All right then. On with the show. So when we last left off, Mark Himebaugh had gone missing from his home in Delhaven, New Jersey, sometime between approximately the hours of 3:30 and 4:30-ish in the afternoon on the 25th of November, 1991. So at this point in our story, the timeline is still a little looser, and it does tighten up as we go along, just in case you were wondering. Police were notified between 5 and 6 p.m. that Mark was missing, and the area he lived in was searched by detectives, local police, and hundreds of local volunteers. Canine officers were brought in, as well as helicopters, and the only thing any of them found was Mark's left sneaker, which was left on the beach near his house. In some instances, they report that it was at the end of a trail of footprints. To my knowledge, it was not. It was just there. The next morning, the search continued, but the undertone seemed different. Activities had gone from a search to an investigation. And I think that difference is pretty key because they do feel different. The suspicion was no longer that Mark had gotten lost. It was that Mark had been taken. And this is the point where the detectives on the case are like, we definitely thought something more sinister was at hand at this point. Detectives began by interviewing Mark's family and anyone who had been in the neighborhood during the hour when Mark supposedly disappeared, which is totally procedure. That's how this goes. They did turn up a few minor leads. Critically, the case was also released to the media at this point. Well, whether it was given to the media or they found it, that's up for interpretation. Mark's photo and story were on the news on every single channel. And after that started, they did, there was, I don't know if I can call them press conferences, but they did get together at the park and Maureen spoke and the police spoke. So there was more formal statements. But at first, the media just started flooding into this neighborhood. They just started showing up. And the neighborhood was really little, so it was pretty crowded. And they often chose the park as a staging place because it was the only place with a parking lot. There are lots of live newscasts that you can see from the time that are from like that park area.
Mhm.
And they interviewed Maureen left and right. There were reporters combing the beach. There were live feeds happening where people were just staying there recording what the detectives were doing. I mean, there was a lot of media scrutiny, especially for 1991. Detectives immediately noticed yet again the absence of Mark's father, Jody.
Hmm.
So they come back the next morning and they're like, "Where's Dad?
Yeah.
Why isn't he looking?" And as I said last week, we will discuss Jody, but we're not going to make any firm judgments. Theories about Mark's father go from eyebrow raising to jaw dropping in a matter of seconds if left unchecked. So we won't be mentioning any narratives that appear to be at least partially, if not entirely, fictionalized.
Okay.
That said, there are lots of things to
Yeah.
talk about. When asked about Jody, Maureen and her family were very candid. Maureen and Jody had been married in the 70s and very quickly had 2 children. They were married for 15 years. Maureen had steady work during that time as a waitress, and then she took up a second job cleaning houses, all the while she was also being a very active and involved mother. So she was busy and she did all the things. She and Mark shared an especially close bond, as did Mark and the members of Maureen's family. So mostly when there are interviews about Mark's case, we really just speak to Maureen's family. I don't know that there's many representatives from Jody's family that seems to be talking to the media. But they all said, that they were close to Mark, that Mark was a very sweet little kid. They all had a lot to say about him. But they all mentioned that Jody was different. They said he bounced from one job to the next, never staying in one place for too long and going stretches of time without jobs. I will say that this is a common problem in this area.
Yeah.
Because businesses know that there are always more people looking for employment than there are year-round jobs. And so it's easy for those businesses to really take advantage of employees by heaping extra work on them, working them into the ground until they just can't work anymore, or refusing to raise their salary because they know that there's a line out the door to take their place.
Right.
So a lot of people work really hard for a short period of time in a lot of businesses. That's the thing. I've seen it happen, and it's happened to me. And you. I mean,
Yeah.
we've both been in this situation. But I am not giving anyone excuses. I am just putting that out there because it is relevant. It seems that Jody's instability, however, was of his own making. He just really couldn't stay in one place for that long. Not only did he not bring in much income, but he also enjoyed living well beyond his family's means. Jody lived in a fantasy world where he didn't need to worry about money. He bought a boat and a pop-up trailer, both of which just sat on their property, not doing anything. All the while back over in reality, Maureen is working 2 jobs and busting her ass, having a hard time paying the bills and keeping food on the table. So the balance is not very balancy. This, however, was not the only reason for the pending divorce between Maureen and Jody, which we did discuss last week. They also had vastly different methods of parenting. As I mentioned, Mark was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and tended to experience meltdowns when things didn't go the way he kind of had planned in his head. Now, if you have a kid like this or you've been around a kid like this, you know that they can require a lot of patience. Maureen had an abundance of patience, but Jody did not. He got frustrated with the situation pretty quickly. According to friends and family, Jody had been a rather distant and discipline-oriented father to Mark, and he didn't seem to really understand him and how he worked. Jody really thought that Mark's differences could be corrected with punishment and a stern hand, which is something I hate. And it's not true for neurodiverse children, but it was frequently implemented back then.
Right.
A lot of times they're like, well, they're just ornery. You just have to be really firm and punish them. That's not how it works. Many children, like Mark, have particular sensitivities to anything they perceive as rejection as well. So stern disciplinary parents can be particularly hard for them to stomach. Criticism can be extremely hard for them to process. And Jody could be verbally and physically rough with Mark. And I use the term rough because there are no reports of actual abuse. But in the 80s and 90s, you could still smack your kid around a little without anybody objecting. It was just a family matter.
Right.
It was a different time. Not like a totally uninformed time, but it was still different than it is now. Maureen's aunt, which I fully thought was a cousin or sister, but it is her aunt, remarked that from what she saw, Jody didn't really appear to have much love or affection for his children at all. He was pretty cold and distant. She also reported another rather disturbing detail. And I should say that I really misinterpreted who this aunt was because she's only 15 months older than Maureen.
Right. Yeah.
You actually pointed that out. I was like, no, I think it's her sister, but it's actually her aunt. But their relationship seems more sisterly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She seems more like a contemporary to Maureen. They
Well,
have
it was
children that are
funny
the same
because
age.
the way that she spoke about her, she did come off like her aunt to
Right.
me. But then,
Mhm.
like you said, like age-wise, it was like, oh, that
And they were
seem really
raising
close.
children of the same age at the
Exactly.
same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But
she, it's
yeah.
sisterly, it's protective.
Yeah.
It's
So
loving.
I had to make that clear because when I talk about her kids, they're not like way older. They're the same age as Mark and Matthew, relatively. Anyway, back to that detail. She reported an incident when Jody was alone with her girls. Now, I'm not sure whether Jody was watching them alone or whether Maureen was there and just in another room or busy or something. But when they returned home from the Heimbaugh's house, they told their mother, Maureen's aunt, I never decide which one I'm supposed to use. It doesn't matter. They told their mother that Jody had exposed himself to them. Now, I'm going to go back to that in a minute, but that is how it is phrased. And this is how we heard it directly from this woman's mouth. He exposed himself to these girls. I'm not 100% sure what that means. I'm assuming they saw his genitals, but I don't know under what circumstance that happened. And the aunt was taken aback. She was pretty shocked, but also unaware of the situation. And the girls were unharmed. They didn't seem like traumatized or hurt by it. It was just weird.
Yeah.
So she decided to keep the incident to herself for now. She's like, okay, I'm not going to upset Maureen with this. We're just going to like chalk it up to something weird and move on. Until another one of their nieces reported Jody also exposed himself to her. And this child's parent told Maureen right away. And with that, Maureen's aunt also came forward with her story. So now we have two adults saying that their daughters have had Jody expose himself to them. This is all documented. And shortly after that, Maureen had enough and filed for divorce. She's like, okay, you can't be doing this too.
Right.
No, I totally understand that with good reason. Now, none of these incidents had been previously reported to the police, but honestly, at that time, this is something that I feel like would have been seen as weird uncle behavior.
Yes.
And that's not what it is. It shouldn't be tolerated. But in the 90s, I feel like most of us had that like friend of the family or uncle where they're like, you just can't leave him alone with little girls.
Yeah, just everyone, just watch out for Uncle Mark.
Yeah. Uncle Jeff is somebody who we can't let babysit, but if he comes to the pool party, it's okay if he stays over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like before he gets to your house, be like, you can't wear those shorts in front of Uncle Jeff.
Right.
It's like, it's that situation, right? Which is awful, but it was not uncommon back then. And also, even if, I mean, I know it sounds like a trope, but it's a trope for a reason. Because also at that time, I don't know what the police would have done. If you called the police and you were like, my sister's husband pulled his dick out in front of my kids, they'd be like, don't leave him with the kids.
Yeah. That's it.
That's all you would get. So, yeah. But at this point, things are not looking great for Jody Himebaugh. He's not showing up. He has a history of being a kind of distant, disciplinary type parent. He doesn't seem to really care that Mark is missing, and he's exposed himself to two young girls.
Right.
So a couple more days pass, and there's no sign of Jody searching for his son at all. Like, he just hasn't shown up since the night of. And it's...
Oh, this was like a couple days past? I thought it was just like that morning, and then they were like, where are you?
That's what I thought too. But then when I went back over it, I noticed that they said, like, after a couple days had passed, we went to find him.
That seems like too long.
It does seem like too long. In the interim, Maureen apparently reached out to him, and he said to her, quote, other people have it handled. The police are taking care of it. You don't need me. Then the police were finally like, yeah, but we do.
Yeah.
And we just thought you were going to show up, and then you never did. So police decided it was time to track him down. And it wasn't too hard to do. Maureen said that he told her he needed to go to work and that the police clearly had the search handled. There was nothing more he could do, which is a weird answer, but he was transparent about his location. He did say, I'm at work. It's not like he didn't tell anybody where he was.
Right.
And Jody was indeed at work at a local print shop called the Inkwell. Police visited him there and asked him why he hadn't been out looking for his son. And he admitted at that time that he didn't have car insurance, so he was nervous about driving his car, and that money was tight, so missing work would have been a major problem for him. The police didn't love this answer, but it did check out.
Yeah.
All of it's true. They then asked about his whereabouts on the day when Mark went missing. He said that he went to work that day at Inkwell, which was confirmed, and then he went to Elaine's to sing with his barbershop quartet. He said, now, last week we spent a lot of time talking about this, and I went over and over this situation. Jody said that he had heard from his son that Mark was missing. He said he's probably just out playing, then pushed his Elaine's gig ahead an hour and a half. So they performed an hour and a half earlier than anticipated. Then he heard from his, I guess his son or somebody at their house.
Yeah.
A second time when they said they had called the police and things had gotten serious.
Yeah.
After that point in time, he finished his gig and then went to search for Mark. So that first phone call, I do not believe happened at Elaine's.
Yeah.
I think they either called him at Inkwell or they called him at home. Then he rearranged his night. When they checked in a second time, it was at Elaine's, at which point he finished what he was doing at Elaine's and then went to look.
Right.
The reason it didn't sound like it added up in all of the other sources for us is because it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it actually happened. I know that's a slightly different version than last week, but I had to really look hard into what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, here's just my one thing about that. I can understand a bit if he was just like, he's probably like, if the initial call wasn't as like nerve-wracking.
Sure.
If it was just like, we just haven't been able to find him, but we think maybe we have a few more places to look.
Yep.
And if he's just like, we know Mark, it's not abnormal for him to be out playing, it's still early in a way, like maybe like I don't know at that point if it was still before dark or what, but if they pushed the gig up in 90 minutes, it only took 11 minutes to get over.
Yep.
And he could have asked, like, if the other 3 members of a barbershop quartet could have also started a gig 90 minutes early, they also could have driven his uninsured ass over to Delhaven to just go look for their son, check out the situation.
And I know one of them did go with him.
Sure that everything was fine and then he could go back to his gig. Now, if nothing was fine, then they obviously could just cancel the gig.
The insinuation was that after that first phone call, he was like annoyed. He was kind of like, he's out playing. It's fine. I don't know why you're calling me.
But then why push it up if he didn't think it was important?
I don't know. And the only place that you can find him saying that, and this is out of Jody's own mouth, is on the People magazine documentary on Mark. And you watch him say it.
Right. I would want to find out if it was confirmed that they asked for it to be started early, which I think is weird.
Also, Elaine's is so inflexible. I can't believe they did that.
That's what I mean.
They book people and they have an audience for that specific thing. So they've advertised it at a time and people are there to see that thing. How did you move it ahead?
That's what I mean. Or did Elaine's ask if they can move it ahead? Like, was it just so it just happened to be? Or did he just lie about what time he was?
Jody said he said.
I know what Jody said, but
I know. I mean, I don't fully know.
Those are my.
There are a lot of sticking points like that in this case. There are quite a few where I go, however, this detail does not line up. And it may seem inconsequential, but I think that every detail in a case this old and this unsolved is incredibly consequential. You need to get them right, especially when there is like an entire novel out in the world that says this is Jody's fault.
Yeah.
And I was going to dance around that. And you know what? I'm not. I mean, if you read Rich McHale's book, he's pretty convinced that most of this is Jody Himebaugh's fault.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be able to read that and that is out in the world for the entire world to digest, you better line it up appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We will come back to that. You and I will discuss it. But anyway, just so you guys know, that is how the timeline, according to family checked references, adds up.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I can see, the most of Mark's family members approve of the People magazine coverage. That is the one where most of them say, yes, this was good. This all seems to check out.
Okay.
So that's why I relied on that one more than others. Anyway, so every other source does say he got a call while on stage. That's the only call he got. He kept singing and then just kind of showed up when he could.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what happened. Anyway, did Jody prioritize this situation enough for anyone's liking? No, he didn't. Okay? I'm just going to be honest about that. He didn't. But he also didn't lie about it, and he could back up all of his claims with evidence. Not only was his alibi airtight and backed by a lot of witnesses, but he also passed a polygraph. I know polygraphs are a very questionable piece of evidence, but he did pass one.
Mm-hmm.
He also didn't make any shady calls from the phone at Inkwell or at Elaine's, and he didn't have a cell phone to do any dirty dealing or deleting. No one did back then. That just wasn't part of the culture, or it didn't exist. Police had no real firm suspicious reason to search his apartment, but they did to look for any kind of evidence of Mark, and they didn't find anything. At this point, Jody was officially cleared as a suspect. The cops were like, it was not this guy. Do we think he's awesome and did everything the same way we would? No. But do we think he's involved in this? Also, no. And that is an important distinction. And despite what other sources might say, he has not been investigated since then.
Right.
And if you ask, which I did, people who are simply local pedestrians that have lived down here and were not embroiled in the documents of this case, they will tell you, oh yeah, they looked at his dad right afterwards, but then never again they cleared him. Mm-hmm. Nobody is still fixated on him. Well, they weren't, at least. But Maureen does say one cryptic thing that I stuck on, and you know exactly what I'm going to say. She says she does not believe that Jody was directly responsible for taking Mark. This could be just the way she talks, or it could be clever wording.
Yeah.
She could be saying, I don't think he executed it, but I think he might have been involved. There are people who agree with that. We'll discuss that later. But she does say she doesn't think he did it. So, anyway, with that lead followed to its end. So at this point, we have to close that book.
Okay.
Let's explore the other leads. On the morning of the 26th, while detectives spoke to Mark's family, other police officers began canvassing Sunray Beach to see what they could turn up. It felt like someone would have to have seen something because everybody was out and about looking at the fire. They're like, they had to see something. Neighbors, though, were at a loss. They were like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. All the while, Mark's photos are slowly being piped into every television screen across the country, basically. He was on every local news, which then trickled into national news. It's that very famous photograph of Mark that was on all of his posters, which immediately started going up all over New Jersey. I mean, having lived down here, they are still everywhere.
Right. Also, what year was the Amber Alert?
Oh, I don't remember. We didn't have Amber Alerts yet.
Right. That was later in the 90s,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or mid-90s.
Yeah.
94 or something.
Yeah, it was later.
But that's what, it's just so unfortunate, you know?
Yeah. We did a whole TLDR on Amber Alerts, but I don't remember the date of it. But I don't know. Again, without having devices in everyone's hand, even if you issue an Amber Alert,
that's true,
nobody's going to know. It's just going to be a bulletin on the news. And it was probably on the crawl on the bottom of the screen when it happened. But I don't think it was as notable. Now your phone is going off if there's an Amber Alert. It's terrifying. But anyway, that wasn't. But the point is, this was actually, for its time, very publicized.
Sure, yeah.
So people were seeing it. Now, I've mentioned several times during this episode that the 90s were, while feeling relatively recent to old heads like us, they were a different time. I think it's important for us to get a sense of what it was like back then before we move on, because I'm talking about media and how things worked. I know I always find myself wondering about modern things when we talk about cases like this. I'm always like, well, did they search his cell phone records? Who did he text? Nobody. That wasn't a thing, But Leslie, maybe you can help us go all the way back to 1991 just for a minute. Maybe you can immerse us in the time period. What was it like all the way back then?
Ooh, yeah.
What are we dealing with? Tell us.
So, we've had some good episodes with the 90s.
We have.
So, we have our grunge influence happening. So there's the rise of grunge music. Everybody's wearing plaid and flannel shirts, ripped jeans, combat boots. Neon colors were carried over from the 80s. So especially kids. We all had neon shirts.
Yeah.
Slap bracelets were big. Do you remember the slap
I do remember them. They were outlawed at my school because you could take the wrapper off and sword fight with them or something. They're they're going to shank you with their slap bracelets.
Yeah. Scrunchies were huge, as they are now. And then it was brand mania. So we had Guess, Levi's, Gap, Tommy Hilfiger. We just had logos just
everywhere,
dominating our
Yeah,
shirts.
yep.
The music was good. We obviously had Nirvana. We had Michael Jackson, Boyz II Men, Madonna, R.E.M., Whitney Houston was huge, Bryan Adams. Everything I do, I'll do it for you.
Bryan Adams.
Right? The big movies that year were Terminator 2, Judgment Day.
Ooh.
So Arnold was like huge then.
Yeah.
The Silence of the Lambs, Beauty and the Beast had just come out, and Hook.
Oh,
I loved Hook.
Me too.
Point Break also. And let's see, and the Addams Family holiday. That
Yay!
was the year for that.
I love the Addams.
The big TV shows were Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Twin Peaks was in its second season, Rugrats had just premiered.
Oh, Rugrats.
And then there was already like Doug and Ren and Stimpy,
Mm-hmm.
Beverly Hills 90210.
Loved it.
And Home Improvement started. And then popular celebrities. So as I said, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Whitney Houston, Michael Jordan. He was like leading the Bulls to victory. Madonna, because she's just always big. And Julia Roberts was like in her America's Sweetheart era. She was in Sleeping with an Enemy that year.
Okay.
And then so some more, I tried to like focus more on kids of this time.
Sure,
too.
yeah.
So we have like toys that kids were playing with were Super Nintendo, Pogs.
Oh my God.
Loved Pogs.
They were all over the playground, and then my school also outlawed them because boys were like trading them and stuff. And it was
so big, yeah. And then when you went to the arcade, like that's just what you were trying to buy were Pogs with your tickets.
I never got the point of them either. You had to like flip them and slam them and stuff. And
you get it real high. Oh my God, my brother and I had so many. And then we had like these massive, really like heavy duty like slammers.
So they were just like tops and marbles for like 90s kids.
Oh, yeah.
Which then evolved into like Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Polly Pockets were huge. Oh, I still have all of mine.
They were also outlawed because you could choke on them.
Holly, what school did you go to?
Peter Mutual School.
Oh my God. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all their toys and action figures.
You could have those. That's fine.
Okay, cool. And then Sega Game Gear.
Oh, that's right. They had the little...
The speed at which I could finish Sonic the Hedgehog on that Sega Game Gear.
Really?
Was like... Okay. I think about that. I'm like, I was really good once. Once I had a skill. Okay, and then this is what kids of this generation did. And I specifically was thinking around the age of Mark and Matt. So they played outside.
Yeah.
Just what we did.
By the way, this is my generation. Yeah. Mark was November of 1980 and I was born in December of 81. So this is like the same.
So riding bikes, playing tag, skateboarding were staples of the 90s. Trading cards, collecting baseball, football, and Garbage Pail Kids were pretty common then.
Yes, I love the Garbage Pail Kids. Yes. They are disgusting. Yeah. I found them recently and my kids were looking at them and I was like, put that down.
Yeah. Saturday morning cartoons. So there was like X-Men, the animated series, Captain Planet, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Arcades were just the best thing ever.
This was also when cartoons had really good theme songs.
Yes.
They don't do it anymore like they used to, man.
No.
We had good theme songs on our cartoons.
I think that's why I love theme songs. So does my daughter. No, my daughter.
Does she?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So she gets, like, when The Office comes on, she dances to the theme song. She gets real into it. Bluey, she only likes the theme song and then she loses interest.
Oh my God. She'll pick it up.
She'll pick it up.
It's so good.
But the other day I put on an Apple like playlist of just theme songs.
Oh, fun.
And we like danced for like 15 minutes.
So good. If you focus, the 90s cartoons are the ones that really hit.
Yeah.
They're so good.
Oh, yeah. Those are the ones I go back to. Okay, but arcades. Like, I mean, we had like movies just about kids in arcades.
Yeah.
Killing it.
For sure.
I literally thought I could just grow up to be like an arcade
kid.
Yeah, that could be a career for me. Just like playing Street Fighter.
Oh no.
Or Mortal Kombat.
I didn't think that.
I mean, I grew out of it pretty fast. But you're watching these movies just like, oh man, they make money. I mean, I guess that's what those kids, then they went into like video games.
Yeah, I guess.
Guess that's where that went. But I thought I could just be on the boardwalk making money.
Somebody would be betting on you playing Street Fighter or something. Okay.
That's why I got really good at Sonic.
There you go.
And like just watching VHS tapes. I mean, like getting to go to Blockbuster.
Blockbuster was
the
amazing.
Best time.
Yeah, it really was because you could walk around and look at everything.
It was
and
a
you had
family
to
affair. It was like, oh, when you get like when you got to get snacks too.
I was never allowed to buy snacks.
It wasn't often, but sometimes we'd get to. And then just like the sleepovers and you'd like plan to like your
you
movie.
go to Blockbuster and rent your movies.
Yeah.
For me, it was like the same 3 movies all the time. I can't count how many times we burned through Empire Records and The Craft. But, you know, it's fine. Rented them every time.
Yeah,
Why didn't we buy? Eventually, we did buy them, but like, oh boy, there was a lot of rentals.
I know, so many. And then for kids, general like fashion trends were those like bright colors and like the neon colors, pattern overload.
It's a bad time for fashion, man.
And denim. Ugh. Lots of denim.
And like not comfortable denim, like thick, scratchy denim.
Yeah. A lot of acid wash.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. Really, really good. But overalls were big. That's why I think I still love overalls and chunky sweaters. Literally everything about this is like, oh, this is what we wear.
Yeah.
Overalls, chunky sweaters, leggings. Yeah. Oversized t-shirts. Yeah. Our track suits. I mean, you're in track pants right now.
I am. I'm in juicy pants that I found at TJ Maxx. They're so comfortable. I'm not going to wear them in public, but they're pretty comfortable right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we just got to watch TV a lot.
We watched so much TV.
Yeah.
So much TV.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the 90s.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That takes us back there a little bit. We can kind of get a feel for the time we were in. I always like to do that. I think it helps. Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah.
Actually, it's really good that you just mentioned the amount of TV we watched because that was a huge thing. I mean, everybody was glued to their television, even children. So they all would have seen the photos that circulated of Mark. And I can tell you, I was a child and I saw them. I saw it happen. So the whole population was seeing this. It wasn't just adults watching the 11 o'clock news. It was anybody.
We all watched the news.
We did watch the news. I watched way too much news when I was a kid. I've talked about this before. But it wasn't uncommon. You knew what was on the news. You saw this stuff. Even if it was just like on Action News at 6, this is going to happen. Yeah. He was in all of those little bumpers and stuff too. Like you would have seen Mark's photo. So along with Mark's photos, local news teams provided a phone number for the Middle Township Police Department. Obviously, it's going to be at the bottom of every missing poster and all of the television ads and stuff too. And at about 6:30, the evening after he disappeared, the police received a very interesting phone call. Joe and Mary Heitzman had settled down after work that night to watch the evening news, and a story came on about a local boy who went missing. When they saw his photo, their blood ran cold. It was the little boy that they had seen walking down the road the day of the fire.
Oof.
Yeah. Can you imagine being that person? I'd be like, I'm going to die. Immediately, they called the police and told them everything. Now, Heitzmans are great. Yeah. They're great. They call the cops right away. They have every detail they can pull out of their head. They really try to help. On the 25th at 3:30, the Heitzmans had driven down to Sunray Beach and parked their car on Delaware Ave along the bay. Now, they are very clear that it was 3:30 at this point in time. And you're in a car, so the clock is right in front of you. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if they were rerouted down that street because they were trying to go somewhere or they stopped to look at the fire. I thought they lived in the neighborhood.
I thought they did too. Like, I thought that they were like getting in their car.
They said they parked along Delaware Ave.
Okay.
So I'm not 100% sure why. There's nothing shady about these people. I just don't know exactly if they lived in Sunray Beach or if they were just there for a minute because they do leave. That is inconsequential. I do talk a lot about details, but they've done so much good that there's really no need to track down where they live. But they stopped and they parked on the side of the road on Delaware Ave to look at the fire. While looking through their car windows, they looked towards where the smoke was coming from. And at first, what they see is a little boy walking, they say, coming down the hill. And what they mean is down off the beach access on the very end of a dead end. Now, I explained this neighborhood before, Delaware Bay. The Delaware Ave is just a closed off street. It's dead ends on both sides. One side is a nature preserve. The other side goes south towards where you would see the marsh fire. And he was coming off a little expanse of like grassy, almost beach where he could have like walked through it to get down there because kids could do that. I would never have done that. And now it's actually gated off. You can't walk that way anymore. You could back then though.
Okay.
So they saw him walking up off the beach down onto the road. And then he walked along the street towards Sunray Avenue. So to me, that says he had gone down to the beach, seen what he could see, and he was going home.
Right.
So, or Sunray Road. I'm sorry. Got the word wrong. So they described the boy that they saw. They say he was wearing a gray coat with attached gloves. His gloves had like clipped to the sleeves of his coat. And he had on white sneakers with red laces. They saw they were kind of untied, like, messy sneakers, but they had bright red laces. This is important. And that he had bright red hair. They said he walked down the road towards Sunray and he was just bopping along. They're like, he's just bopping along. Like, that's so cute.
Yeah.
I love that. And while they were looking, towards where Mark was, the husband noticed that they were also not alone on the street. There was a car parked a little bit down the road behind them. So this car would have been in between Sunray Road and the dead end towards which the marsh fire was happening. They noticed the car is an old station wagon style car. In the driver's seat was a blonde woman who was wearing a rabbit fur coat. From the illustrations they've shown of like what they think this woman looks like, I think the coat was like leather with the collar that's fur.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure. They just say rabbit's fur coat and then they show this woman with like a collar that has fur on it. Obviously this is a reenactment, but whatever. And in the passenger seat, they said there was a man. The man opened the passenger's door, got most of the way out and like stood on the running board. So that little like ledge by the door, he stood on it so that he could look up and over the roof of the car. And in doing so, he's like started trying to get this little boy, who we now know as Mark's, attention. The man was heavier and he had long, dark hair. He wore a flannel shirt and glasses, and they said he appeared to be scruffy looking. Never good when you refer to a stranger as scruffy. The man called out to the little boy, and then they engaged with one another. Mary Heitzman watched this interaction and said that she found it unsettling. She pointed it out to her husband. She's like, that man is talking to that kid. He's like calling him over. Is that weird? I don't like this. And her husband was like, listen, it's probably fine. Don't get yourself all nervous about it. Like, we don't need to get into their business. And they left, which I'm sure torments them to this very day. I don't blame them for anything at all. There's so many people rerouted through this neighborhood. I would have thought, is he asking a kid for directions? That's weird. But I digress. The problem with finding out who this random couple on the road was, as I just mentioned, was the detour. Hundreds of people passed through the area that day. People who would have no other reason to do so under normal circumstances. People that were just traveling from point A to point B. And this is a vacation town. They could have been anybody from anywhere. If this was a crime of opportunity, it might as well have been executed by a ghost. There were no traffic cameras, and this was way before people routinely had like security cameras facing out of their home. It's before the time of Ring doorbells. There's just nothing documenting the people on the street. So we really can't confirm anything. The Heitzmans didn't write down a license plate number or talk to the people who approached Mark, so it was almost impossible to track down who they were. But this was a lead. It was something that the cops had and could hang on to. It was vague, but it was there. So the detectives kept going. Perhaps the Heitzmans weren't the only people to see Mark that day. If he was out and about, maybe somebody else saw him. And as it turns out, they weren't. Now, this leg of the story is widely retold in a very strange manner, in my opinion. Usually, it is said that the Cape May County Park South Guard, or in some places he is referred to as a ranger, saw Mark from his post at 4 o'clock. This guard, it is insinuated, was at the park every day, and everyone says that he saw all the kids and had a rapport with them. He knew all of the local kids. He saw them come and go. He could point them all out to you. In my brain, he sounds like a crossing guard or something. He sounds like someone who has an interaction with these children every day and therefore kind of knew them. Now, this man said that at 4 o'clock, he saw redheaded Mark come down Sunray Road and walk across Bayshore with a blonde girl who looked to be about his age. The girl wore a blue winter coat with an orange stripe on the back of it. He said the two of them were definitely walking together and talking to one another. So they didn't just happen to be on the same road at the same time. They were together. And they were walking towards the park. And that's all he saw. We don't know if they spent any time in the park. We don't know when they left. We don't know if they met up with anyone else or when they, I don't know, got in a car. We don't know anything else. We just know they went towards the park. Now, as I mentioned in the first episode, there is no sneaky back exit to this park either. So Mark and this girl would have entered and then gone back out of the same entrance area on the same major highway or gotten into a car in the parking lot that is right off the road. You can see it and driven out of the same entrance. These are very visible places. But the guard didn't know these things. He didn't have answers to any of those questions because he simply wasn't there that long, in all honesty. We'll get back to the girl in a minute. But here's the thing. Cape May County Park South does not have a guard or a ranger. That is not a position.
Yeah.
Nobody sits or stands at the entrance and watches the kids come and go. The man in question had to work for the sheriff's office in the parks department, and I looked him up. He did. His job would have been as a patrolman, and so he would drive a cruiser around the area and through the park parking lot. He would park in the lot at different places for short periods of time and observe, then circle around at closing time and beyond when it was dark out to make sure there was no one in there after hours. His job essentially would have been to keep an eye out for people trying to covertly do drugs or have sex most of the time. The reason he can't tell anyone if Mark and this girl did anything besides walk across Bayshore Road towards the park is because he was in a car, likely driving by.
Yeah.
We can't even confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was actually Mark he saw.
Right. Now, so is that more like an assumption of what he was doing, or do we know that from other facts?
Okay. I know for a fact that a paid position that would include a person in a badge patrolling that area entails driving around it, being in the parking lot in your cruiser for short periods of time, and generally just patrolling the area. According to the Cape May County government site, that is who they employ to do those things. They are in the parks department of the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
I don't know for a fact that this guy never did anything else, but I know that it is not a position to sit and guard the Cape May County Park South.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is just the way it has been rock tumbled and phrased over the years that it really reads as though this guy was like every kid that walked in. He was like, "Hey, Jimmy, how you doing? Looking good, Jennifer. I love the new coat, Leon." That's not what was happening. This guy drove by a lot.
Yeah.
So he recognized the same kids.
Right.
Also, if you are from a cruiser and you just see people walking across the street, and his report ends at them not even going in the park, just walking across the street, which is why I think he had to be driving by. Otherwise, you'd say, and then they walked in toward the swings. They swung on the swings. They walked over to the pavilion. He didn't say anything else. All he said was, I saw them come up Sunray Road. Bayshore's very busy, so you would watch kids crossing that street concerned. Yeah. I saw them cross Bayshore Road towards the park. And then his account ends.
Right, because if he was in the park,
he would have seen what they were doing.
And then they walked into the park.
They were there for a while. They left at this time. I noticed they went over here. I noticed they talked to somebody else. None of that exists.
Yeah.
So when they say, we talked to the guard saw the kids all the time. He knew it was definitely Mark. And I don't understand how that could have been as true as it is being projected.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that this man saw something, remembered it, and said, I better tell the cops. Yeah. It's a responsible thing to do. However, as I just mentioned, Mark's photo was everywhere at the point in time when they spoke to this man. And when you see, we've talked about this psychological effect before. When you see somebody's picture all over the place, they will insert themselves into your memory.
Yeah.
You will start seeing them everywhere. This is the reason why when a person who is missing is announced to the media, you suddenly get a tip line flooded with people who think they've seen them because they're just recalling images and inserting them into their head. Now, am I saying that this is definitely what happened with this case of this quote unquote guard? I'm not. But I'm also not saying that I trust 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt that he saw that he definitely saw Mark. Because as far as this timeline goes, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I think we all see where this is going. If we are to assume that the two people in that car that the Heitzman saw talking to Mark are the people that took Mark, Why would he be in the park with a girl a half an hour later? And then that's the last time anyone ever saw him, because that's what this is. And it is in every report of Mark's case. It is in his Charlie Project, his National Registry of Missing Children. It's in all of his reports that the last time he was seen was at 4:00, Cape May County Park South. Why don't we know anymore?
Yeah. And he wasn't actually seen at the park.
He was seen walking across Bayshore Road towards the park. Now, that stretch of Bayshore Road basically is the park. So if you're crossing the street, like, unless you're going to the park.
Yeah.
But you do have to go in the entrance. It is gated all over the place. You can't just you're not just in it. You have to get in there, because you cross at that point and there's a basketball court that's all fenced off. And there's a big gate that you go into, and beyond, and a fence on the other side. So you do have to go in this entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that this was Mark with a mystery girl? Sure. Is it also possible that these were two different kids? I think it is.
Yeah.
And I just want to put that out there, not to doubt anybody in authority, but just upon using fresh eyes. Your timeline can be really messed up if you have somebody reporting him a half an hour after we think he went missing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that is possible. And again, that is the last reported sighting of Mark on the 25th. On the complete other side of the neighborhood with a girl nobody knew. Because here's the kicker. No one ever found this girl.
Right.
Ever.
Nobody with that jacket ever came
Nope.
back.
The jacket doesn't exist. The girl doesn't exist. And it's worse. A police sketch of her circulated widely, as well as a description, and nobody had any idea what she was. She was not a resident of Delhaven, nor was she visiting with any residents or a family member. No one in town knew her. She did not attend any local or regional schools. She did not play on visiting sports teams. She was not a tourist that frequented the area. She didn't have a summer home. Her family didn't have a summer. No one had ever seen anyone that looked like her wearing that jacket at all.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the witnessing world was concerned, this girl doesn't exist. And at this point, the FBI has gotten involved. And the search for the girl stretches far and wide. But nothing to this day has ever turned up. Don't you think if this girl existed, we would have found her?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless she's was dead immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
But even so, she would have come from somewhere. Don't you think somebody in the whole world would have at one point in time seen this girl? It can't be a no. You know?
Even if she was well, I guess it would depend. But even if she was another missing girl, or if...
But then you would have had a missing poster of her. It would have existed.
That's what I mean, yeah.
It's really hard for me to believe what is described as a well-kept little girl. She weren't she looked distressed. She was in ratty clothes and barefoot or something. They're no, she had a nice blue jacket with an orange stripe on the back, and she was walking around talking to Mark.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of theories out there. We'll go through them in a second. But this is why this one instance to me feels shaky. I don't feel like it is as definitive as a lot of people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
You could have seen anything. That could have been two boys walking down the road. We have no idea.
Yeah.
There are theories, though. The most pointed out and logical theory around this girl, and the most developed theory, is that she was brought into town by whomever took Mark and essentially was used as bait.
Mm-hmm.
So they set her loose and they said, go make friends with this kid and get him to be in this place at this time and help us convince him to get in the car. And then Mark would have been I'm with my little friend, so I trust this automobile full of people I don't know, and I'll get in and go to her house and have a good time. That is what it is suspected, if she existed. But there is another theory, and it is so out there that I thought for sure it was an urban legend, but it's not.
Ooh.
Yeah. And this is a firsthand story.
Okay.
You will not get it anywhere else because it happened to me.
Okay.
So, allow me to explain. So when I moved to Delhaven, I had a very strange encounter. I was pushing my baby in a stroller down Eldridge Road when an older woman came out in front of her house. I believe it was on Eldridge. I don't remember exactly the location. I think her house ended up being on Sunray. Eldridge is at the end. I think that's the loop I had my stroller on. Sorry.
Okay.
She was just a few blocks away, probably 2.5 blocks away from the Himebaugh's house. And it should be said that at the time, I did not know that Mark had disappeared from my neighborhood. I only read reports that said he was from Cape May, and so I assumed that meant Cape May proper. I did not know it meant Delhaven.
Yeah.
Okay. This old woman, walked over to the curb in front of her house and called me over to say hello and introduce herself. I was new. Fine. That's great. She said her name was Joanna. And then she told me a host of health issues she had been enduring. This happens to me a lot. I don't know why. And her health issues included, but were not limited to, a free-floating ovary.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
One of them was somewhere in her body, but doctors couldn't find it.
Wow.
I was like, what? She's like, yeah, it could be. She's like patting her chest and stuff. Like, it could be anywhere. I don't know. I'm like, Joanna, okay. Okay, I thought, we're having a real weird time.
Yeah.
I could either make an excuse and walk away as fast as possible or lean in.
Yeah, and you leaned in.
I chose to lean in, but here's why. I had seen the for sale sign in her window. And I was curious because at that point in time, my parents were considering buying a house down near where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
I had a baby, and Will and I had knew we wanted to have another baby in the not so distant future. So the help right in my neighborhood could have been nice.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. The house was strange, though. It was so clearly owned by a hoarder.
Yeah.
The whole front, there was like a sunroom off the front, so it's just all windows. And there were stuff, and it was like dolls and boxes and toys and cleaning products piled all the way up, covering all of the windows. You could just see like stuff pressed against it, like a packed tight aquarium. It was very strange. And the backyard was a maze of outbuildings. There were more little buildings and sheds and stuff than I have ever seen on one property. It was just like a maze of little buildings and a pool, a dried up pool.
Oof.
Yeah, that's like haunting, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But despite all of this, the lawn and the landscaping were immaculately kept by a team of professionals.
Yeah.
There was always like landscapers buzzing around. They like planted flowers in the spring in this like spooky looking house. I'm like, what is happening?
That's South Jersey.
Yeah, it was a really weird situation. So my thought was like, they're going to sell it at some point in time. Maybe it'll be like really discounted. Now, the for sale sign in the front window in the aquarium full of things was homemade. It wasn't from a realtor. It was just one of those buy owner signs with like big fat marker with a phone number listed on it. And it looked like I had found the owner.
Yeah.
Okay. In for a penny, in for a pound, I guess. And I told Joanna and her floating ovary about my parents, and I asked if I could see the place. And she balked. She didn't want to let me inside. She was like, well, you can't go inside. And I was like, oh, no. And she said, but I can show you the outbuildings in my yard. And I was like, okay, why not? So me and my infant walked through what turned out to be a total time capsule. One building was a little one-bedroom house, kind of. Yeah. And everything in it, including the bed linens, curtains, appliances, dishes, clothing, and like boxes from food and stuff, was from the mid-1980s.
Wow.
It was 2012.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, this was not that long ago. Joanna said that her grandson lived there for a little while. And the other little outbuildings were glorified sheds with storage hoards. There was the empty pool was back there with like a tarp in it. I was nice and I made small talk. I mentioned that my daughter was celebrating her first birthday at the end of the week. Joanna told me more about how she was always on death's door and her ovary was coming out her mouth or something. And she also said that she'd not only owned her house and her property, but the house and property next door on the corner, which she rented to a lovely family that she hated. What a time. She had someone also who took care of the landscaping for both properties. Well, that explains the landscaping. Because she was like, oh, my family called them and arranged for them and I pay for them. So I'm like, oh, okay, this wasn't her doing. She's clearly a mess, but somebody is behind the wall pressing buttons and strings. And she said that there was one thing she couldn't stand, it was a messy lawn. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, you got
sheds full of 80s merchandise, but you're not a messy lawn. The whole thing was eerie, and it didn't take me long to decide I had had enough and it was time to walk away.
Yeah.
So I bid Joanna a fond farewell and then ran home to call my parents and tell them they could not buy that house. The next day, while on my walk, I was going for a walk every day at this point, with my little stroller, I met a woman who nannied for the family who lived in the house behind my own. She was pushing a carriage as well. So we're both with our little strollers like, hey, how you doing? Let's talk. I mentioned that I had met Joanna, and this woman's eyes turned into silver dollars. She was like, oh my God. And I was like, why? Apparently, this nanny lady had also heard the tale of Joanna and her floating ovary and even more. She told me that years ago, Joanna had been arrested for keeping her little blonde granddaughter padlocked in a closet. What? Jesus Christ. She said that Joanna was crazy and that when she finally died, quote, they would find Mark in her backyard under one of those sheds. Hand to God, this is a conversation I personally had. I said, Mark who? And that's when I found out.
Right.
And I had already bought this house.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Chris padlocked child in the most infamous missing child case in the state.
And you were almost going to go in her home.
Yeah, I was like, I had to sit down. It was a lot. So as you can imagine, I went home and really fired up that internet quick.
Yeah.
I thought this story about Joanna could not possibly be true, right?
Yeah.
And also there was no way that Mark Himebaugh had lived that close to my house. She must have been talking about in the county. The answers I found out were the story was 100% true. Mark had lived 2 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 90s, Joanna lived in Fishtown, PA, where she had an impeccable townhouse. So there was a disconnect between then and 2012. Okay. Because not impeccable any longer was her living situation. She was known throughout her neighborhood in Fishtown for being fastidiously clean and very eccentric. Her daughter had run into trouble with the law and was put in jail on drug charges, and Joanna was granted custody of her little blonde granddaughter. Little blonde girl about Mark's age. Joanna would put her to bed every night in a large closet in the basement of her Fishtown townhouse at 6 o'clock and lock the door from the outside. She'd leave a bucket for the girl to use as a bathroom, say, nighty-night, sweetie, and then come back in the morning.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Why would you ever do that? Well, a lot of people say that she was afraid that this child would make a mess in her fastidiously kept home. And I'm like, that cannot be true because I have seen where Joanna lives. Others say, and this I trust more, that she was incredibly paranoid that people that her daughter had known from the drug world were going to come and try and get this child. Yeah. So at night when she was not having a couple drinks and going to bed or whatever, she would just not trust anywhere but a locked space for her kid, her daughter's kid. Is that okay? No, it's not okay. But, all right, whatever. There's also reports in the Pennsylvania newspapers, which is where you get the better story about Joanna than you do from our newspapers, that she never left this child alone, ever. At school, she hovered around. She talked to the teachers talked to her. The girl didn't do any extracurricular activities. She didn't have any friends. Yeah. She didn't go to anybody's house. She was very closely monitored. And in the summer and on warmer weekends, Joanna, her boyfriend, and her little blonde granddaughter would stay at her summer home in Delhaven. So this house, when in the 90s, was not Joanna's main residence. She was there for vacation time. And when they stayed in Delhaven, she would put this little girl at night in her bedroom closet, which is 4 foot by 4 foot. It's nothing. And she had a board and a padlock on the outside door of it. And she would padlock this kid in with a bucket to pee in overnight. And overnight was from 4:30, 5 o'clock until the next morning. Yeah. It was too long. Eventually, word got out because, she was like, well, when I have my pee bucket and they locked the door, and her teachers were like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. And police were sent to investigate Joanna. They took the girl away from her, obviously, and they placed her with her aunt in Kensington. And Joanna was arrested because you can't be doing that. Right. That's not okay. Now, the supposition here and the moral of this whole long story is that little blonde girl was the girl Mark was seen with. And it was Joanna's granddaughter, right? And the reason no one knew her was because she was kept locked in a closet. Gotcha. It's a haunting story.
It is a haunting story.
People suspected that the girl brought Mark back home and Joanna just went ahead and locked him up too to be the little girl's friend.
And then so forgot about him.
You stay in the closet. We don't let you out. You can hang out with her at night and then I'll just keep you in here as her pet. What a psychotic thing. That is super wild. And I wish I could say it was more far-fetched than it was. But Joanna did everything except for take Mark. Yeah. So here's the problem with this theory, this haunting theory that she kept him as a pet for her granddaughter. It was Monday when Mark went missing, and that little girl was in school in Pennsylvania at the time. It was also November, not a time when they were in Delhaven. Yeah. This little girl regularly attended school, and when she was taken by the police, she remarked that she didn't know anything was wrong with the way she had been kept by her grandmother until she saw herself on the news.
So traumatizing.
Kids watch the TV, though. She found out about her own story by watching the news, by watching TV. So don't you think she would have seen Mark?
Right, right. She'd been like, oh, I know that boy.
Exactly. So it stands to reason if she had been in Delhaven when Mark went missing, which she wasn't, or if a lost little boy that was on every single channel on the news was in her grandmother's shed, this little girl would have realized something was wrong and spoken up.
Yeah.
And she would have been like, that was me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah.
Nothing. And she is in the world. She lives in Pennsylvania, or at least she did with her aunt in Kensington. Someone would have been like, that picture looks like this little girl who is right here.
Yeah.
And it never happened. It was not her, you guys. This is not who this little girl was. But it is a very compelling and spooky story. Joanna did, however, show up at my daughter's first birthday party with the oldest, filthiest, and most haunted-looking baby doll I've ever seen in my life.
She knew you guys. She really knew you guys.
She's like, I brought this for your daughter. And it was like after the party had ended. And I was like, oh, she's just going to sleep. And it went right in my outside trash can. Ugh. And I thought she died, by the way. Here's the absolute ending to Joanna's story. I believe she lives in Florida now, actually. She moved. I thought she died because the cops and ambulances were at her house several times and they pulled her out the window once.
Oh, man.
Yep, not kidding. And when she left, they did take apart the house. They did take apart the outbuildings. They gutted everything out of it. Nobody found any skeletons.
Yeah.
So,
okay,
that's the end of that story.
All right.
So where do we go from here? So after they are, researching these really flimsy leads, time is just pouring by at this point. A week after it happened, that Monday was Maureen's birthday.
Right.
Thanksgiving had passed. Christmas had passed, which was very difficult for their family, obviously. Winter passed. A new year ticked by. Things turned into spring. And still nothing. They really don't have much information. Until that spring, the cops get a lead. They find out about a man from Ocean City who was grooming young boys and sexually abusing them. So first he's just in Ocean City, which is probably about 25 minutes from Delhaven.
Mm-hmm.
It's close, but not in the neighborhood. Then they find out he did travel to Middle Township to also recruit and groom boys. So this guy was like the kind of pedophile that they make movies about. The like, I have candy in my van type of guy.
Ugh.
Who made friends with boys he saw walking around on the street, slowly got them to trust him over a matter of weeks and months, and then would take sexual advantage of them in his car and bring them to his home. I have never heard about this man, and we live here. Yeah. It is wild that in the coverage of Mark, this is only mentioned in one thing. They never mentioned this guy ever. Never, ever, never. I don't even know his name. But it was in the early 90s. He was in Ocean City. And the police on Mark's case then spoke to his victims. They said, he had taken them around in the car a lot and they had spoken to other boys because that was just like they suspected of this girl. He had kids in his car. So other kids would trust that situation. They would get in the car too. Mm-hmm. And one of the victims was being driven through neighborhoods to be like, do you remember anything? And the police drove him through Delhaven. And he was like, oh yeah, I remember here. We talked to a little kid with red hair and crutches. Now, he said this happened in October of 91, which is before Mark disappeared. Yeah. Mark was only, and the cops at first were like, well, it couldn't have been Mark because Mark had a walking boot. He wasn't on crutches. When they spoke to Maureen, they told her about this and she said, no, for 1 week in October, he had crutches before they put him in the boot.
Yeah.
So this absolutely could have been Mark, probably was, but they didn't say they took him. They said they spoke to him in this guy's car. They pulled over and talked to him and then they left.
Well, eventually. That feels big.
Doesn't it? Never mentioned, really. Never. You don't really see that too much.
That also feels like such a specific detail.
So specific, because they for sure talked to Mark. They were like, I was in this neighborhood, and they're right in front of Cape May Park, and they're like, this was a little boy with red hair and crutches. There is only one of those in that area, okay? Yeah. And nobody knew he was on crutches. That is a detail you would only have known if you saw him at that time. It was just 1 week. Mm-hmm. So this is not something I think they supplanted in their memory by seeing a picture of him on the news. I think they actually spoke to him.
Right, because Mark didn't have crutches.
Yep, that's right. So. Absolutely. And there is no report anywhere that's called him a boy with crutches. They said he previously had a boot on. That's it. So this man is eventually arrested and charged and put in jail for 5 years. He's convicted of sexually abusing kids in the area. Again, why don't we know about this?
Yeah.
And the cops go and they talk to him. They're like, did you do this? Like, do you know anything about Mark? And he's like, no, I didn't take that kid. I didn't take him. And eventually they're like, well, this is a weird coincidence. That's it. 100%. That is it. They cannot find a link to this guy other than a kid saying they talked to Mark out of a car window. But again, just because you talk to him doesn't mean he took him.
He might not have taken him, but he could have been a lead for somebody.
Could have been. We don't know. I mean, that's all we have on that.
Yeah.
It dries up after that. I mean, that man is still alive and no longer in jail. He lives in Florida, maybe with Joanna. I don't know. They're both hanging out like, we got to lay. No. I'm just kidding, guys. That is not true. He does live in Florida, though. He is still around. That's just the end of that story. I wish there was more. There isn't. I know. I don't love it. So then in 1992, the police decide they're going to re-interview the Heitzman. So this is November of 1992, which means a whole year has passed. And they say, let's really buckle down and make a sketch of this man that you saw.
A whole year later.
Yes, I know. I think there was an initial sketch, and then I think they tried to do better. But we have never seen this. We've only ever seen one sketch.
Okay.
It's the sketch that we're all thinking of. If you know this case, it'll be in our photo suite. It is a sketch of a man with long dark hair and like a downturned mouth. And like he just looks kind of creepy. And he has specifically like a square-shaped aviator glasses. He has on what we were going to affectionately call serial killer glasses. Because for whatever reason, they all wear them and you know what they look like.
Yeah.
So that's what this sketch looks like. And at this point, they released this sketch to the public. They're like, everybody look at it. Do you know this man? Nobody knows him. Nobody in the neighborhood knows him. Nobody in the county knows him. Nobody in the state seems to know him. They're like, I have no idea who the hell that is. But they put it all over the news. Then another whole year goes by. And in February of 1993, the police in Middle Township get a call from a police office in Philly. And they say, we need to talk to you about something. We brought in, or we had a gentleman call us. His name is Daniel Cole. He is a man-on-man sex worker. And he says he is frequently solicited by a man named Thomas Butkovich, or Butkovich. Butkovich. I prefer Butkovich.
Yeah.
Let's be serious. That's what we're calling him. He says this man who he refers to as Tommy frequently brought him to his house for sex. And on one occasion, he showed him a video of a young redheaded boy gagged and shackled and being assaulted. And Daniel Cole said, that looks like that kid from New Jersey. And his customer, Tommy, said, that is that kid from New Jersey. And he said, I'm sorry, what now? He said, yeah, I took him. And Daniel Cole said, what did you do with him? Said, I did like I did with the others. I got rid of him afterwards. That's all, he would say. And on several occasions, this Thomas Butkovich man had asked Daniel Cole to help him get children. He said, you have to help me get kids. Daniel Cole said, that is not what I do at all. I'm not getting you children. You can solicit me. That is what I do as a sex worker, but you absolutely cannot get me to get you children. No. And I think it took a lot of time and guts for him to say any of this because he was a gay male sex worker, referred to as a prostitute everywhere, in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
AIDS was everywhere.
Yeah.
Being gay was not super accepted.
Mm-mm.
And neither was sex work. No one is going to give this guy any kind of time of day. They're not going to believe. I mean, even after he came out with the story, they're still like, well, he's still like a shady prostitute. But they were like, okay, well, we got to look into who is Thomas Butkovich? What is this guy? What is he doing? They pull up a picture. They find a picture of him. And I shit you not, he is the police sketch.
Yeah. It's identical.
I've never seen a police sketch actually match up the way this one matches up. It is, that doesn't happen. Down to the shape and detail of his glasses.
Yeah.
There is no way it is not. And later they did find out that Thomas Buttigieg frequented campgrounds in the area. So there's a bunch of campgrounds right by Delhaven and in Middle Township. And he would like spend weekends there a lot. So he was, that's down the shore for him. Like that's where he went. He was in the area at times. So they're like, okay, this is quite the lead. So they go and they track down Thomas Buttigieg and they say like, okay, we have to search his apartment. They find a ton of porn, but it's adult porn. But I mean, hundreds of videos.
Right.
Like VHS tapes, hundreds of them. Ugh. That's alarming for anybody. They're like, Jesus Christ, I guess this guy just really likes this porn. They don't find any videos of children. They don't find any materials involving children. They don't find the video of Mark. And they don't find any evidence of that. They're like, well, all we have is a little marijuana that we can hold him on. So they hold him on a possession charge. Just, again, if you want to hold somebody, you can find a way to hold them usually. And that's what they're doing here. Which is, again, why I think that if they really suspected Jody Himebaugh and they had charges of him exposing himself to children, they could have held him.
Yeah.
They didn't. They didn't do that. But in this case, they did do that. So they have more of a suspicion here. And then the cops question him. They're like, okay, well, like, did you have any involvement with this child? Do you know this child? We have this report. Did you do any of these things? He denies everything, but he says, I do fantasize about driving 100 miles away, kidnapping a boy, raping and killing him. But they're just fantasies.
Oh my God.
I guess he was planting the seed that he could say what he said to Daniel Cole was fictional, that he was just telling him, I want to do that. But the dots never fully connected because Daniel Cole didn't say he was told a story. He said he was shown evidence, which is different. But I do have to remind you guys that a VHS tape can be destroyed or hidden. Mm-hmm. Just because they didn't find it doesn't mean it didn't exist. Yeah. This man had absolutely no reason to say he saw something if he didn't. And he also led them right to a person that looked identical to the police sketch. So I really don't feel like he was lying. The police in Middle Township do eventually talk directly to Daniel Cole. They can't right away. They don't find him for like years. And then they locate him again. And he's like, yes, it's me. I'm the one who said this. And he confirms everything they got in the original report. I have the article here. Sorry, I'll just read you some from it. Yeah, so this article was published in 2020. This is from Person of Interest. It says, quote, people need to know what I seen that night, said Daniel Cole. Cole is a former prostitute. We use the word sex worker. Prostitute's not very nice. Who claims that Thomas Buttigieg Jr., that Jr. is key because he does have a dad, was a frequent client of his. Buttigieg, a convicted sex offender, is one of several persons of interest in the disappearance of 11-year-old Mark Himebaugh in 1991. Some people who knew Buttigieg believe there's a strong resemblance between him and the sketch. Obviously, Cole told NBC 10 that he was with Buttigieg on the night of February 14th, 1993, inside his Haverford Township apartment. That's when he said Buttigieg showed him a graphic video that left him traumatized to this day. Quote, a little boy who was shackled, handcuffed, and had a ball gag in his mouth, Cole said. Cole told NBC 10 that Buttigieg sexually assaulted the boy in the video, and he's positive that that boy was Himebaugh. Quote, I remember looking at the little boy's face and just the look on his eyes, Cole said. I mean, completely, you ever see fear just through the eyes? And that little boy was scared to death. Cole then recalled the disturbing conversation he had with Buttigieg as he saw the video. I said, that looks like the little boy from South Jersey. And Tommy told me it was him. He confessed to me that it was him. I said, what did you do with him? He said, well, I did like I did the rest of them. I disposed them. What do you mean the rest of them? He said, well, I got 5 or 6 other kids I did. What? Cole said he contacted the police the next day and told them about what Buttigieg allegedly showed him. Quote, he kept reassuring me, I need you. I need you to help me get little kids. Yep. Quote, I've been in grand juries, Cole said. I testified up in Camden for the feds. They need more people to come forward on this because he, Buttigieg, is there. People seen him there. I just need people to know the truth of Tommy Buttigieg, you know? So he tried. That's graphic. And that article is from 2020 because it was like when the case was being rehashed. But at that point in time, unfortunately, Daniel Cole had passed away. He did unfortunately die of AIDS, which is awful. And was also something that was, God, it's in a bunch of articles before 2020 when things were not as sensitive, when they would just be like, well, he was a gay prostitute that died of AIDS. I'm like, okay.
It's just so awful.
It's awful. And I got to tell you, like, I think that guy is a hero. The fact that he came forward was so difficult. And I think it's amazing that he did it. Not once, but twice.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then the cops, while they still have him, they're like, okay, well, let's get an alibi from this guy, right? And this kills me every time. He tells them that he, didn't work that day. He was at home earlier in the day, and then he went to a computer store and he bought something, and then he came home. Went to the computer store at around 3:00, he says, and it would have been impossible to drive from Philadelphia to Delhaven in 30 minutes. And he has a receipt, and the computer store has a copy of a receipt that is timestamped at 3:00. However, computer store also says, well, we don't necessarily timestamp accurately. Sometimes things are not documented until after they had happened. So while we can tell you that that's what it says on this paper, we can't tell you that it's without a doubt accurate.
They're like, he probably came here that day.
Yeah, he definitely was there that day.
He was here that day, but we didn't process that paperwork until...
He's like, they said basically it's timestamped 3:00, but he could have come in at 11:00 that morning, and they just didn't process the paperwork until later. There's just no way of them to know. And I guess the clerk that was working there at the time didn't say, like, I know what time it was. They were like, I don't know. This is what it says. Right. The police kind of said, well, we're kind of forced against the wall because it looks like this man has an alibi and we can't keep him. We don't have any evidence. So they let him go. They released him. I won't say they let him go because that sounds like they didn't want to keep him, and they definitely did. Time then passes again, as it is wont to do. Then in 1998, good old Tommy Buttcabbage comes back around because he is arrested for grooming and molesting a group of 3 boys in Chester County, Pennsylvania, from September 1996 until 1998.
Oh my God.
It happened hundreds of times. This is hundreds of counts of sexual abuse and battery on these boys. What he did was he befriended these kids' families. They were low-income families. They didn't have much to offer. The kids were alone a lot because parents had to work. And he was giving them things. He was taking them places and buying them things. And the parents knew him. And they were like, this is just a nice guy that, wants to help our kids or whatever. And he was really taking them back to his grubby little house and sexually abusing them for 2 solid years over and over and over again.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Most reports of Mark's case will tell you that he was arrested for sexually abusing young boys. They don't go into detail about the length and frequency of time in which this happened. It was a lot. I can't get over the fact that there were over 150 charges.
Right.
And that I found in the freaking Philadelphia Inquirer from forever ago. So it did happen. And he is arrested and sentenced to 36 years in jail. So, there was a lot of evidence on that one.
Wow.
When Middle Township police hear about this, they're like, oh shit. They go right there to talk to him. They think, okay, well, maybe we can get him like a plea deal situation where we say, if you confess to also taking Mark, we'll take death off the table or we'll plead you down to 25 years without parole or something. And they go and then they say that they're like, okay, just tell us you took Mark. What did you do with Mark? And he's like, I don't have anything to say to you. And he's still in jail. He'll be in jail for the next 10 years. And he has not talked to anyone. He will not say a word. All I can tell you guys is that he is in jail. So we have that going for us, I guess. In 2004, Mark's case got bounced over to the cold case unit where it was revitalized. Mark's case has been revitalized several times. I will say that the Middle Township Police Department does continually revisit it, and so does the FBI. They tried to DNA test his sneaker. The chain of custody on that sneaker is a nightmare. It was like in somebody's car and it was bounced around and stuff. But they try. They try to get anything off it.
Yeah.
Nothing. There is nothing on it. So I mean, unfortunately, that is kind of where the case is left today. Here are the widest questions that still exist and the issues that come up. The first in regards to that shoe is how it got there. Because a lot of people, their timeline, and I tend to believe this, is that Mark was taken at 3:30 when the Heitzman saw him talking to who we assume is Thomas Buttigieg and some girl. And that's after that, Thomas Buttigieg came back and threw the sneaker on the beach as a red herring. So that the police would then think, oh, he got swept away by the tide or he's in the marsh or in the fire. And they did think that.
Right.
So if he did that, it worked. It served the purpose. And that would also explain why when his mom and brother originally went out looking for him, they did not immediately see that sneaker because it wasn't there yet. So I tend to believe that that is true. Some people think that Mark took it off after he walked onto the beach because his foot hurt and he hobbled away and that's where it remained. They just didn't see it. I tend to be of the mind that it was thrown back on the beach to throw cops off his scent.
Yeah.
A lot of people are still really fixated on the blonde girl, but I told you my theories on that. I don't know that she existed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that leg of the story holds as much water as we think it does. I also don't know that it's necessary, especially for what is very likely the solution to this case.
Yeah.
There are cops in Middle who still think he could be in that marsh. They're like, we just don't know if he was sucked down and he's like under, ages of mud and marsh weeds. We could have just not found him. Again, I tend to not think that's how things went, just because I think that a kid that lived in the area was not unwise enough to just be like mucking out into the marsh. And also I think they would have found him. He would have surfaced.
It's just so shallow.
It is very shallow. It's not, there is no like deep water. And we have enough time where it floods and that would have flushed anything trapped out. And times when we have droughts. We recently had an awful drought where everything was dried up. That marsh was dried up for miles. If there was something just sitting there under muck, it would have evaporated and they would have found him.
Yeah.
So I just don't, I can't see how that is related. But yeah, Maureen still would, publish a poem she wrote for him in the newspaper every year, which I read in the opening or closing of this episode. It's going to be here somewhere. And it is revisited. People don't forget him. Mark was spoken about at what would have been his graduation by his neighborhood friends. He has a tree dedicated to him at the Cape May Special Services School that Maureen still gets to visit. It's called the Tree of Hope. I think we should probably go see it. And until last year, Maureen stayed in the same house with the same phone number.
Yeah.
Just in case he came home, which is the most devastating thing I can think of in the world. Right. And also exactly what I would have done.
Yep.
You can't leave. Are you kidding? What if they were trapped somewhere and they come home? What if you're not there?
I know.
The thought is just staggering. But last year she did finally leave.
Yeah.
So she's happy. From what I have seen on social media, I did not stalk this poor woman too much. She seems to be in a good place where she has friends and support and a nice life. So I am grateful that it has to be torturesome. It never goes away. She talked about always, whenever she is interviewed, she's like, Mark, if you're out there, just know I still love you. Know that I hope you're safe. Know that we are looking for you. She will never close that book until she knows for sure that it's closed. And I don't blame her. I wouldn't either. I can't really tell you much about Jody. I know he lives out of state as well. I know that when Richard McHale's book was published, there was definitely waves from his side of the family and from Mark's older brother where they were like, this is incendiary. And it is. The book is incredibly inflammatory. I mean, if you believe it, okay. If you don't, oh no. And anybody who was close to Jody was immediately infuriated. His family, if you look at the Amazon reviews of this book, the family is in there.
Yeah.
And they are upset. And I don't blame them. There are a lot of things that are extrapolated in the book too. The book is not just listing of facts. It's a lot of narrative sewn together from other things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what Detective McHale did to get there. I chose not to reach out to him because I don't have great feelings about all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that Mark's whole family is not represented in that book the way his family would like to see representation happen. So I mean, like, Maureen did for a time support the book and like go on podcasts with Rich McHale, and she was so grateful that someone was talking about her son and really still trying to find him. But I don't know if that narrative was supported.
Right.
It's
we don't have a clear.
We really don't. And I also don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. Because what lengths would you go to keep your son's memory alive, to keep his story out there? Any lengths. You go to any lengths.
Yeah.
But if she truly thought that she needed to go get Jody, she was here. She knew where he was. He still sees his other son, like she could have.
Mm-hmm.
So that says to me that, like, she just wants to know the truth.
Yeah, for sure.
She just wants people to keep looking and to find out what happened and put the situation to bed finally.
Yeah.
And I will say that, like, if you want to know more about this case, there's some more out there. I mean, like, this is really most of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much more you're going to find. You can watch the People magazine documentary. We will put a link to that in our show notes. That is verified, supported seemingly by the whole family. Everything I can find about that documentary on their personal social media and stuff is in support of it. So that's why I felt confident using it as a source, because they all seem to feel confident using it as a source.
Yeah.
If you choose to read Richard McHale's book, I would like you to go in with your critical thinkers fired up heavily and to be skeptics. Believe what you feel is researched and you feel is true. And if you think something is questionable and you really don't love it, dig into it and don't let it be a fact.
Right.
Because his book is the only book out there on it. So there are every website, web sleuths, all the things devoted to discussing this case say, oh, well, in 2022, there was a book published about it and it was his dad.
Right.
His dad apparently sold him to Thomas Buck Cabbage.
Yeah.
That is what is said in this book.
Right.
And people said, that's the answer, the end.
Right.
But that's not the answer, the end. That is somebody's theory. But don't you think if the rest of the Middle Township police believed that, more would have been done?
Right. I think that's where you and I have that, like, he might not have been a good guy.
Right. I don't know if I'd be friends with him.
He also might not
but,
have done, like, I don't know that he did this. But
exactly.
But unfortunately, I mean, the police seem to have ruled it out.
They did. And
I want to
according to the rest of the detectives.
Yeah.
And the detectives that were originally assigned to that case, which Richard McHale was not one of.
Right.
He came in later. They say, and he was there. He was there, but he was not the original, like, team, as far as I have been told. But the powers that be on that case, they ruled Jody out.
Yeah.
And they did not revisit him.
Right.
Now, according to Richard McHale, he has other sources, but his sources have not come forward to anyone else.
Yeah.
So I can't verify any of it. There is no way to verify anything else.
And I guess I would say the fact that the Middle Township Police, like, continue.
They do. Absolutely.
To work on this case. I feel like they are not even exhausting, like, like, exhausting it, but also, like, they're keeping things open. So if something feels more shut, then it might be shut. Also, but also we might not know. We might not know everything the Middle Township Police has in their hopper either. I will say that a lot of times we are hypercritical of the police. That's part of our job. I think Middle Township did an excellent job. I really think they did just about everything they could possibly do. I mean, a lot of the times it seems very frustrating that they couldn't arrest Thomas Buck Cabbage or they couldn't do more with this guy from Ocean City. It is frustrating, but it is also frustrating to them because legally, if they had made a mistake, they could never try them again. That's the thing. If you mess it up and you arrest him for something, but you don't have enough of a good case and it is kicked out of court or he's found innocent,
double jeopardy says you can't do it again.
Yeah.
So they can't just make this flimsy case and then go, oh, well, we tried. I support what Middle Township Police Department has done with it.
Yeah.
I don't think that they did a bad job whatsoever. I haven't been with Richard McHale every step of the way. I don't know. Maybe this will come around later and he'll be right. I don't know. But I am not comfortable saying I believe he's definitely right. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. This was really hard.
I know this was a hard one. It's so close to home. It's
really close to home. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to make anybody mad. All I can say is what I have read and what I believe in my experience to be either true or too nebulous to believe.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think you did a great job of just bringing some perspective to it too. And some of the questions that we had about it, like a park ranger and just certain things that whether it like fully matters or not, like just to have a better idea,
right?
Just to help be like, okay, like it's not as clear as that, like, because
it's been retold so many times.
Well, that's what I mean. So when you're reading certain articles and people feel very confident about something, it feels like, okay, but this is why it hasn't been solved, because it really isn't a confident statement when you really look at it.
Yep.
One of the other things, though, because I feel like this was in the People's investigation. I think the couple, what were their names?
The Heitzmans.
The Heitzmans. I believe they say that situation, she felt so uncomfortable about seeing that man talking to the boy that she had her husband circle back.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Because I know you rewatched it.
I rewatched it and I didn't pick up on it the second time, but I thought she said they circled back and the car was gone.
Yeah, I fully remember them saying that. So
if we both did, I think it definitely happened.
Which to me, again, is like, if they circled back, there wasn't a lot of streets to go through. Like they would have seen him walking, probably with the girl. Or walking somewhere else.
Yeah.
But they were gone. So why would they return with him and that girl to the park?
That's what
You know what I mean? So I do think, I do agree with you that most likely that was it.
I think the trail in Delhaven ended at that encounter. I do not think it extended somewhere else. Think that a very well-meaning man who patrolled the area thought he saw something. And I just don't think it was what he thought it was.
Yeah.
I don't think it was necessarily Mark. I think Mark was gone at that point in time.
Now, the only thing I will say in defense of that park ranger,
and maybe he did see it, honestly, because I don't know,
is that, I mean, they are trained to observe.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's, which is why also his word is taken a little bit more seriously.
Sure. And he was a good guy who did a good job and was trying to help people. Yeah. And I'm sure he did see two kids cross the street. I don't doubt that happened. I just don't know that it was for sure Mark and some mystery girl who has never appeared.
Yeah.
Unless it was one of the other kids that Thomas Buckhavage that he freaking kidnapped and then disposed of. In which case, maybe that is what he saw. The truth of the matter is, none of us can say anything definitively. All I can say is my opinion is a possibility.
Right.
It is possible that your timeline has two different outcomes. And if this one encounter at the park ruins the other timeline, I then would have to consider perhaps it isn't what you think it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. This weighed so heavily on me. It was really, really hard to decide what to say and what not to say. I did not want to bother Mark's family in any way. I know we could have had them on. Honestly, I don't think it would be helpful for them to have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, because they have been very forthright. There are lots of sources where they talk, and I watched all of them, and I know they have been tortured by this. It's awful. It's awful. I can't imagine any single thing in the world worse than what they have been through. Not only do they not know where this little boy went, but they also have this image of him possibly in this horrible video that a man saw and then they never found again. And then maybe the guy who took him is in jail, but in 10 years, is he going to get out? We don't know what any of the, I can't.
I know, it's awful.
It's awful. Just awful. The last thing in the world I want to do is hurt a single one of those people. Oh my God, no.
Yeah.
But I am and have been haunted by this situation since it happened. And I so hope that with all of the advances in cold case management, they are able to find closure for Mark's family.
Yeah.
The thought of it just never being solved is insane to me.
I know.
I don't know.
Ugh, just awful. Well, Holly, I do think you did a really wonderful job on this. So
thank you.
I think it was a really...
Caused me like a whole ulcer.
Rough, but important case, and a good one that we did for our 200.
Happy 200. Weird and old timey next week or something like that, guys. Ooh. So anyway, yeah, that's as much information as I can get my hands on. If you're a patron, you can listen to our host mortem, because I can talk about more of the details I was uncomfortable with putting on air over there. So if you're a patron, you can hear some of that. If you want to contact us with any information about this, you can. I would also urge you, of course, to talk to the Middle Township Police Department. I will put all of the phone numbers and links to any of Mark's tip lines and case file, like who you can report things to, in our show notes, in our photo suite, and on all of our social media sites. Honestly, me saying it out loud here is not going to help you, because you're not going to write it down. Go find it a place where you can see it. It is everywhere. And please, if you or anyone you know knows anything about the disappearance of Mark Himebaugh, please, please, please tell somebody.
Yes.
Please, 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 please. Somebody knows something. Somebody knows something out there. We just need you to come forward.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Toast?
Toast. Good God. There are so many people that I would toast in this episode. I would definitely toast Maureen. God. I don't know how she is as strong as she is. I think it is impressive that she has had the dedication and tenacity she has had for a great many years, and that she could smile and wave at like a silly girl roller skating in her neighborhood all the time. So cheers, Maureen. I hope that your new location is wonderful and that you are enjoying profound happiness as much as you can, as often as possible. Cheers. And to the rest of Mark's family who desperately miss him, cheers to you guys. And everybody who looked for him. There are so many people in our community that spent so much time.
Stayed up overnight the first
for
night.
Weeks.
Yeah.
There's been, and even subsequently. I mean, when I lived in Delhaven, there was like that big billboard put out on the park, and like people still look for him. So cheers to our community who really has never forgotten Mark to this day. And they still talk about him all of the time. The effort is still very strong. And the Middle Township Police Department, cheers to all of them. And lastly, to Daniel Cole, a very brave man who did not have to come forward with the terrifying information he had, because he also stood to be arrested. He was a sex worker, wasn't legal. Cheers to him for everything he did. May his memory be a blessing.
And Holly, we have a new patron.
Oh, hooray!
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So cheers to our best fiend forever, Stephanie Summers.
Thank you, Stephanie Summers. Your name sounds like a reporter, and I like it. Probably because of Gail Summers, but still. Yeah. I love it. Okay. And if we went 200 more episodes without covering this case, we would be dead.
Thank you for listening to the We Would Be Dead podcast. Hit subscribe now to never miss an episode. Rate and review our show on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Would Be Dead Pod. And join our Facebook group to discuss the podcast and more.
Three years after Mark's disappearance, Maureen Himebaugh wrote a poem for her son. This poem used to run in local newspapers every year on the anniversary of Mark's disappearance, and we would like to end our coverage of his case with this poem. It's called My Hero. 3 years have passed since that sad day. You viewed a fire and went away. 'Twas not your choice, but some strange fate. I miss you so, but I still wait. I wait for you, I'm staying strong. I know you'd want me to hold on. You disappeared one winter day, so near the playground where you play. One sneaker was the only find, a part of you found left behind. My hopes, my dreams, my plans for you, all shattered by the loss of you. A loss so very hard to bear. I look for you, but you're not there. I miss your smile, your laugh, your gentle hugs, your love of nature, animals, and bugs. You loved them all, and the great outdoors. I long for you to have much more. 11 years was all we had. I cherish them, but I'm still sad. I cry for you, I miss you so. Oh, why, my Mark, did you have to go? Holidays are not the same. You're not here, there's so much pain. This world sometimes is so unfair. We all have our cross to bear. My love for you will never cease. You've given me an inner peace, a special strength that tells me you're okay. I know you're either safe out there or in heaven far away. An answer, yes, I must have one. And that was by Maureen Himebaugh.